The Bears have addressed most of their pressing needs so far this offseason, but there's still a lot of work left to be done.
We're going to discuss that and a little bit more on this episode of the House Huddle podcast. Huddle up! As always, I'm Rob Schwartz. Tonight, joined with me with both of you guys, Bob Weiss in the top, my top right. I don't know if it goes like that in YouTube or not, and Justin hanging out at the bottom. Welcome in to another great episode of the House Huddle podcast. We're going to talk about some needs that the Bears still need to address to get this season right. But before we do, hit that subscribe button and then go to the comment section. I really want to drive that home. Go to the comment section. We're going to go through our top five needs. Tell us where you think we're completely wrong. Maybe our rankings are a little bit off. Maybe you think there's something that's way more important. That's what we want to hear from you in that comment section. So definitely talk to us.
Yeah, we love the comments. We always respond. We love to hear what you think, and let us know if you agree with us too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
But we like to hear it all.
Yeah. All right. So how you guys doing? Real quick, get right into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. I mean, we know the Bears always win the offseason, but as Bob said, those moves, as exciting as they were, have not solved all of their problems or all of their needs. So we're going to go top 5 needs, but we're going to start at 5 and work our way down.
All right, so let's throw it up right now. Number 5.
All right.
Early down running back. Bob, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, Swift we all saw how he handled first and second down. The big kind of buzzword with some of these running back prospects in the draft this year is contact balance. And I do not believe that's how you would describe DeAndre Swift as. This team needs somebody they can count on to fall forward for 4 or 5 yards on first and second down. That's got to be the foundation of this team. They rebuilt the interior of the offensive line, and maybe Roschon Johnson will be good enough, but we know we cannot count on Roschon Johnson for 17 games. That's just not going to happen. That's been established. So still an absolute priority for this roster has got to be somebody to count on early downs out of that running back position.
Bob, I'm really glad you brought up Roschon Johnson, because a year ago at this time, thinking we had like a 3-headed monster of Swift, Herbert, and Johnson. I mean, Herbert was barely used, and they ended up shipping him out for, I think, a 6th-round pick. And Johnson just underwhelmed. I mean, it's not only the injuries. I just don't think that's what he's going to be. And with such a good running back draft class, and with Ben Johnson coming in, knowing he utilizes a 2-back system, at least he did in Detroit. Again, I don't want to say everything that happened in Detroit is exactly what's going to happen here, but he wants that, or he could figure out a way to utilize it. So I definitely agree that this is a big need, if not maybe even higher, but it's definitely a top 5 need for this team.
Yeah, definitely a need. And, with respect to Swift in particular, he can still be a weapon for us on offense. He showed that he can make explosive plays in the NFL, and that's fine. But part of what, being a good coach is putting your players in the best position to succeed. And just early down carries for DeAndre Swift is not letting him use his abilities to the best of his ability.
Yeah, and having those 2 picks in the second round, I think, are going to be crucial to finding that running back, despite the fact that it is a deep class, so they could get it at 72. They could get it at 148. There's really no one left in free agency outside of the big name of Nick Chubb, who hasn't really been, he's 29. That's kind of like that plateau age when it comes to running backs. So is he even going to be able to put forth what we've seen from him, 2-3 years ago? Maybe J.K. Dobbins, who hasn't signed yet, who had a pretty good year for the Chargers. So if they don't find one there's not a lot left in free agency. But, I think it's going to come to that second round.
I don't know who will get the reference, but you name those guys, Rob. That sounds like the type of running back the White Sox would sign.
Well,
they like to wait till a guy, his card looks good, but they get the end of the career. So.
And Griffey Jr.
There you go.
All right, well, let's move on to our need number 4 here. And that's going to be offensive line depth. And in parentheses, I put developmental. And I think for me, that's like the key word in here. So, Justin, I don't know if you want to kick this off since we had
sure.
Bob go first?
So, I'll be happy to. I mean, as Bob said at the outset of the show, there were some exciting moves made this offseason. And those are the type of moves where an offensive line that gave up, 68 sacks last season, you definitely need to address. And so you get an all-pro in Tooney, who's 32, I believe. You get a guy who has familiarity with Ben Johnson and Jackson, and you get Dahlman, which is all great moves. But as far as the future, and it was funny, my son just the other day asked me well, who are their backups? And I was like, Bill Murray,
Bill
Murray,
Ryan Bates.
I mean, you got Karan Amagaji. You don't know what he is. There's a lot of question marks there, and obviously, again, if you're addressing this through the draft, those are question marks too. But depending on where in the draft you're going, they're not as questionable of question marks, I suppose. Plus, you just need lots of guys, and the key word is develop those guys. I now feel a lot more trusting that the type of coaching staff they put together might be able to coach guys up. But you still need the guys, and I don't know if they're in the building, so bring in a few more.
Yeah, and the starters look solid right now. We still don't exactly know what's going on left tackle. And I definitely agree that developmental depth is important as well. But I mean, that's why I think this is a need to press out that it's not just developmental depth. I think we need dependable depth. Like at some point, a starter is going to go out, and we need to know that the person going in is going to perform. Last year we had Matt Pryor was his name, and I would count that as dependable depth. He came in and was adequate, right? We don't want him starting, but that's the type of depth that still is kind of missing on this roster. I know the guys up in Dallas all love Ryan Bates for whatever reason, but the guy just is not dependable. So we just need somebody that we know somebody goes down, they're going to go in and play just fine and get the job done.
And how could I have forgotten my U of I brethren, Doug Kramer?
Because he's a fullback now. I mean, it's sad though that Bill Murray's probably the most dependable out of all of them, and he only played 2-3 games. So I don't know. It's going to be real interesting. I think maybe just because he's the comedic relief, he's the most dependable.
I thought you were going to say his through the roof PFF grades. But I know we don't always trust him.
On a per snap basis, he was as good as anybody in the
right?
NFL.
Yeah, no, I mean it's got to be found in the draft. You have to build through the trenches. That's what you have to do every year. Whether it's just one guy this year, maybe they can find some UDFAs. We talked about it in a prior episode where we looked at arm length. There's a lot of backups when it comes to UDFAs at the offensive tackle position. So look, there could be guys out there that might not get drafted. Go find them. Find those guys. Build this team up. I don't care where you find them. All I want is guys who can go out there and play football, right? Go out there, push people around. That's what you have to do in the trenches. And I think at least one, though, needs to come out of the draft. Ryan Poles doesn't have the best. Well, I shouldn't say that because Darnell Wright. I mean, he wasn't my top 10 pick, and he's proved me completely wrong. So I will say,
also have to say Braxton Jones was a good pick.
For sure. I mean, he was in the fifth
round pick.
Yeah, for sure. It's more the Nate Davis. I mean, there's been ebbs and flows when it comes to his analyses. Now, is that just him, or was the Nate Davis thing more of a Ryan? I'm sorry, not a Ryan. A Matt Eberflus situation, who came out as soon as they got him and said, "Look, we had to game plan against him 2 times a year. We love having him here. He was an awful guy to have to try to get through on the defensive side of the ball. Now we have him on offense." It felt like Eberflus kind of pushed that one through. I'm just hoping that now that Ben Johnson's here, it's a little bit different because, again, ebbs and flows, hits and misses. Happens to everyone, but there's still holes. And I want guys, I don't want to just talk about the Philadelphia Eagles because they won the Super Bowl, but they're a team that comes to mind where it's like one guy leaves. Look, you got Kelsey leaves, Cav Jurgens comes in, and he just looks like he's been playing football for 10 years. So I want that to happen here in Chicago.
Yeah, you still got to take your swings. You got to take your swings. I'm hoping for one of those first 4 picks on the offensive line, and then somebody later, whether that's a 7th round UDFA, but you got to get a couple in the building.
So Rob, you kind of segued right into number 3. You said a name that I thought it's kind of like Harry Potter. You're not allowed to say Voldemort. I didn't think we were allowed to say Eberflus anymore, but
Well, maybe because he just kind of lost the team last year.
you could say that. He lost the whole city of Chicago, I think. So number 3, and honestly, it could be anywhere in the top 5, is to actually have an identity and to be a disciplined football team. Now, to be honest, this is what the Bears have said over the years throughout the Eberflus era. Like, we have a great locker room, we have a great culture, and I bought into that in 2 seasons ago when the record wasn't there, but they put a good fight in at the end of the season and stayed together. But that definitely wasn't the case last year. And I don't want to keep talking about last year. With Ben Johnson coming in, he was the top coaching candidate. But as Bob keeps saying many, many times, a lot of people might have just elevated him to that status because he's a great offensive mind. And that's not necessarily what's going to make him great. He has to take this team and get the most out of them, offense, defense, special teams, to truly buy into what he seems to be about. They talk about coaches winning or losing press conferences. I feel like he's won every single one that I've heard. All the times he's been in front of the mic, I've been impressed. But it's not about if I'm impressed or you're impressed or any fanalist out there is impressed. This team has to buy into that and truly believe and show it in their play. And so when you talk about something like EPA, that's every single down of the game, doing the absolute most to improve the odds of your team winning. And I think it's hugely needed when you come on the heels of what we saw last year with Eberflus.
Yeah, and you talk about needs, like, yes, they need this identity, but the Bears players need to do it right now. They need to start buying in right now. Like, they need to buy what Ben Johnson is selling. Now, Ben Johnson has to have the goods so that the players actually buy it, but it has to happen now. We can't get in a scenario where we're in October, the offense is struggling, and the players like, well, we didn't really install it very well, and, we just can't have that anymore. So it's not just you need the identity. The buy-in needs to start right now in these voluntary off season and all the way through training camp.
I was one of those people that made fun of Dan Campbell when I watched him on the Hard Knocks when the Lions were on it, right? And they started off horrible his first year. Didn't think he was going to amount to anything. But look, that team had an identity. How much did Ben Johnson play a part in that? We don't know without the Dan Campbell side of it, just as much as Dan Campbell doesn't know without the Ben Johnson side of it or without the Aaron Glenn side of it. But the one thing that gives me hope is we've heard Amon-Ra St. Brown talk about how much he loved Ben Johnson as a coach, right? So clearly guys bought into him there. I just don't know. It's different being a coordinator than it is being a head coach. The one thing, though, that I do love about the approach that Johnson has brought into this is he didn't just go out and get like guys that he knew, guys that he's friends with. He spoke about this. Like, I went out and got guys who I think are going to push me to be even better. And Dennis Allen, he's talked with guys like Dave Tobe, who has never gotten that head coach gig. But look, people here in Chicago should know who Dave Tobe is. One of the most highly respected special team coaches in the NFL. I think special teams coaches are one of the best because they typically have their hands in on so many different players on the team that they kind of get a feel of offense, defense, and special teams. And then, keeping Hightower, that clearly spoke. People here must have still respected him for him to be staying around. And we saw guys like DJ Moore stop hustling last year. I really hope that those types of things do not happen. And I think, Justin, I know you had it at the top of your top 5 needs, and I think this definitely hits the head here as something the Bears need to, as Bob said, buy into right away.
Just 2 more quick things, and one's a pop quiz for Bob, but be ready. Okay. So he had just said recently, oh, no, it's slipping me now. He was asked at a press conference, how are you going to, what are you going to do to make the process easier on your players, blah, blah, blah. And he said, it's not supposed to be easy. Doing things the right way is hard. And like when he says that, I'm like, whew. I mean, that's when Ryan Poles was like, oh, I hired the right guy,
That's the right answer.
But we need to see it. But Bob, pop quiz time. Do you remember the first thing he said, like publicly, that we heard from Ben Johnson when
we talk about that little video the Bears put out?
Yes.
And like the whole office is there applauding him, and he's like, "Get back to work. What are you doing? You're just wasting everybody's time applauding me."
And you said it as it was a joke, but you could tell it was serious too.
There's truth behind every joke.
That's
Absolutely.
Right. All right, let's move on to number 2. All right. So number 2, the Chicago Bears need to find a way to have a dominant pass rush presence in the NFL. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to come from one person. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to come from 2 people. Maybe it's a whole group effort. I'll kick this to Bob first.
Yeah, I mean, so this starts with just having more pass rushers, right? They've done a good job. Grady Jarrett, kind of penetration up the middle. You got a Danebo who like can go on the outside and the inside. I really like that, but they still need at least one more on the edge. They still need some development from the kid who we drafted last year in the 5th round, Austin Booker, right? So there's just needs to be more. The pass rush needs to come in waves. We cannot get to a spot where we're having guys we just signed off the street in November playing 40% of the downs. Like there has to be real NFL players on that line, down in and down out. That defensive line is a rotation. You're not just counting on 4 guys. You need 6, 7, 8 guys to create that pressure. So they're still a little bit short on that depth chart. They still need to bring in some more on the defensive line. And that's not necessarily the only place to get some pass rush.
Well, so when we talked identity, we were talking Ben Johnson, but there's also the identity that Dennis Allen's bringing to this team. And again, it ties to Eberflus because Eberflus was the head coach, but he was also the DC. In terms of play calling and things like that. But we know Dennis Allen likes to disguise looks. He likes to bring the heat, play man-to-man defense, which Jalen Johnson's already very excited about. But there's a secret weapon, I believe, that we're going to see a lot more out of this season. And they just signed him to an extension. I'm going to call him the pocket knife. That's Kyler Gordon. And we on this show, we're in support of that. In our mock-off season, the very first thing we did was extend his contract. So the Bears did that today. I'll leave Rob to give the details on it in a moment here. But I am very curious to see how he will be used in a Dennis Allen system. Because to your point, Bob, yes, you need the guys up front on that line. And when you can get pressure with 4, that's the optimal condition. But when you sometimes can't, or you just want to give a team another look, the blitzing ability of Kyler Gordon, the blitzing ability of TJ Edwards, maybe even Tremaine Edmonds. Was that
Jaquan Brisker?
Yeah, Brisker. And maybe even we see Tremaine Edmonds take a step in this defense. So there's an identity that needs to be established there, but it starts with making the quarterback uncomfortable and affecting their EPA in a negative way.
Yeah, we're talking press conferences. Well, Dennis Allen brought up Kyler Gordon in his first press conference. He was a name that he first seemed so giddy about. And now, like Justin just said, he is here. He's here for another 3 years, $40 million contract, a little over $31 million guaranteed. And applauding to us, because we went back and looked and we had it at 4 years, $54 million. So we were willing to keep him here 1 year longer, but and a little bit more money. So
roughly the same AAV, roughly the same.
But when it's not your money,
Right. Exactly.
Right, that's good for Kyler Gordon too, because he gets to go back into free agency a year earlier, a year younger. So it probably worked out best for all parties to have a 3 and not 4.
100%. And I keep, again, I don't want to just keep talking about the Philadelphia Eagles because they're the Super Bowl champions. But one thing that if you watched the Super Bowl, their defensive line, everyone brought it. Everyone had a part in getting to Patrick Mahomes. And that's, I think, what we need to see here in Chicago. It doesn't need to be, look, I like Josh Sweat, but he's not a Myles Garrett, right? So like Montez Sweat, we got a Sweat on our team. He could be that guy. And then you got these defensive tackles with Grady Jarrett. I'm hoping Gervon Dexter takes that next step. And to Bob's point, we talked about with the offensive line, attack the trenches in the draft. I think they need to find at least one more piece, whether it's on the interior or the exterior, I don't care. Someone who's going to help get to the quarterback. And that brings us to our number one need for the Chicago Bears. Dun, 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 drum roll. Boom. All-pro production, because that hasn't happened in a while.
100%. They already brought one All-Pro in, Joe Tooney, which is huge. I think that's really an underrated aspect of, we improved the offensive line. Great. But you know what you also did? You brought in the best player on your roster currently as well. And we just need more of that. And it's why we're all proponents of best available player in the draft. Like, it really doesn't matter where this All-Pro is. It could be linebacker, it could be tight end, it could be cornerback. It doesn't matter. You just need more players who are considered the best at their position in the NFL, right? Now, we're hoping that Caleb Williams, maybe within a year or two, could possibly be that All-Pro. A guy like DJ Moore he might be topped out at a Pro Bowl level. He's never even made a Pro Bowl, right? But maybe Roma Dunze can project. Some of the guys on the roster, we already talked about Kyler Gordon, right? He's getting paid like he's the best nickel in the league. So that's kind of there, but we just need more and more elite players.
I mean, quite honestly, outside of Tooney, who's not yet suited up for the Bears in a single game, Jalen Johnson's pretty much all you got at that level. And
Can I interject though? He should be an All-Pro. I'm sorry. He is, in my opinion, the only guy on this roster, and I was going to make my point, but since Justin chimed in, the only guy on this roster who I consider a top 5 at the position.
So 2 years ago, didn't he make second team All-Pro, but not the Pro Bowl?
I don't even think he got that. And if he did, I still don't care. He should be first team All-Pro. He's, in my opinion, a top 3 corner.
Well, this could be the year because he's already talking, and I hope he had Dennis Allen's approval when he went out and said this, but he said, I'm following the number 1 receiver all over the field, and I'm locking him down. And if you do that on a week in and week out basis, that proves what you got. And
it's better coaching process to take your best player and feature him and use his skill set down in and down out to take out the other team's best player.
Makes sense. I like it. But you're right. I mean, and I'm not even going to reference the Eagles. I'll reference all good teams, all teams that are there year in and year out. It's because across their roster, they have players that are at that level. And I mean, we know because we try to analyze these things, we often went into every week knowing the Bears roster is not as good as this other team that we're facing this week. And it didn't mean you were going to lose, but imagine if you flip that and week after week after week, you have the stronger roster. That puts the other team at a major disadvantage. So it needs to happen. It's through development. It's through this draft that's coming up here and some of the other moves they've made, but not until we see it will we really buy in.
Bob, you were right. He did make second team All-Pro in 2023. But I also believe that was the year that he got snubbed in the top 100 and even Aaron Rodgers was ranked higher than him.
Yeah. That was it. I think he probably made the Pro Bowl too. Yeah, I knew that he was an All-Pro and then got crazy, just disrespected otherwise.
Yeah, it was because he wasn't top 100 the next year.
Yeah. Right. You guys hit the nail on the head. There's not really much more for me to say. I'm hoping that they can find at least one guy in the draft that can kind of work his way into that role in the next 2 to 3 years. Draft take a bit. You can't expect guys to come in right away unless, maybe an Ashton Genty, but I doubt he's going to fall.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to fall, but that's the one thing when Bears, we can't take a running back. That's a luxury pick. Well, look, he's a guy that could be legitimately one of the best running backs in the NFL. So you're really going to, pass on that opportunity to be elite somewhere. I just don't think the Bears are in a position to do that either.
No, and I don't think, from what I'm hearing from our guy, Gary Ross, they're not looking to trade up. But, they could also be keeping that closer to the vest than what, Gary's being told.
I'm not sure I would advocate trading up for the running back either. So there we go, talking out both sides of my mouth.
What I'm hearing, they're not willing to trade up for anyone. So even if Travis Hunter falls to a certain spot, even if Abdul Carter falls to a certain spot, and that's a little alarming to me because I feel like maybe they just don't think they're going to be there, and that's why he's hearing what he's hearing from his source. But look, they need to find playmakers, whoever that is, and that's why people are against Tyler Warren. But if Tyler Warren's there at 10, I think he could become one of those types of playmakers, right? So, there's a lot of things that they need to do to become a Super Bowl contender. I think that they've taken the right steps. I think maybe they're a playoff contender, just like I thought they were last year, and they fell flat on their faces. So hopefully the coaching change, that identity that we talked about, is on the change. And hopefully they can find a couple more areas to fill the needs that we just laid out. Again, if you don't agree with these needs, or if you feel like, they're in the different order, or if you feel like, look,
what needs did we miss? Let us know if
there's something out there. Tell us. If you agree with us and you're like, oh man, I wasn't thinking of it that way. Because look, Bob came up with some of these like outside the box thinking. We weren't just going player positions. If that got your mind turning, like, oh yeah, that is a bigger need than just we need to find a left tackle, right? So let us know in the comment section. Hit the subscribe button. If you guys got nothing else, I got nothing else. Nope. All right,
yeah.
Everybody. For now, let's hold on. Let me get rid of this stupid tracker. All right, bear down, claws up.